Coming up on this episode of In Your Mind.
Sometimes that also is off-putting for people that we are fully transparent, very much an open book. I definitely agree with what you said earlier. I think most lawyers wouldn't be open to do this type of interview. They wouldn't mention that they're recently had a breakup, that, X, Y, and Z, and just different things. And I think for me, and part of it probably subconsciously is to erode that stigma, is that I want you to know who I am. Sam Mazzeo, owner, founder, and managing partner at Better APC, a boutique law firm that serves nonprofits, small businesses and startups, freelancers and solopreneurs, and I am excited to be here today.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of In Your Mind with your host, me, Paul Trudell Payne, and I am beyond excited to welcome our next guest, who happens to be my lawyer now, who also sort of a friend, definitely a friend here in San Diego, one of the only few that I have. So please, everybody, welcome Sam. Sam, how are you?
I'm good, and I love that was the intro, because I always want it to be that way with my clients. I think, being friends with the clients definitely helps with that old attorney stigma.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I like being able to just send a message, what the hell's going on? Because it is hard. It's hard, that relationship in particular. I'd say your lawyer, your accountant, right? Those are, I feel like, the most intimate relationships, honestly, more so than even probably the person I'm married to, just because you have to know a lot of stuff. And then they're also some of the hardest relationships to have, because there are a lot of people that are in that role that really like to keep things so far away, almost to where it doesn't even feel like I don't even know if I'm a client, because I don't talk to you, because I have to talk to the second intern, assistant, something to just get a message to you.
I like to call that the ivory tower. Yeah, that, accountants, CPAs, a lot of those professions, they're sort of walled away in their ivory tower and they don't really interact with people. And I think, I was going to say, I think that's some old world thing, but I don't know where it came from and I hate it. So I'm glad that I don't do it that way. And I always have to tell people, if I'm your first lawyer experience, I'm ruining you for every lawyer experience you'll have from now on.
It's true. I mean, when I met Sam, he didn't even know, well, I guess I didn't meet him. When I found Sam, he didn't know that I found him. When I first moved here, he had a website. It was so cool, so different than any other lawyer. And he just started this new firm. Same thing though, so different than any other lawyer. And I had him on a list of people to call, because I needed a lawyer here in San Diego. And I mean, I don't know, maybe you're second or third. It was whoever Google pulled up, right? Who was coming up. And I called this person. And actually, you know what? That person wasn't on the list. That was a recommendation from someone that I met here. They were like, please call this lawyer. He'll take care of you, because it was their personal lawyer. And I had a conversation with him that made me so scared that I was like, I'm not going to look for a lawyer anymore. And just done. And so I stopped everything and then randomly got connected to Sam.
Yeah, it was through a mutual friend that also was on the show one of the times recently. And I saw that interview and I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is so much different than every other video interview I do. You actually talk about real stuff instead of just the prepackaged questions.
Yeah, it's fun. It's I know what it's like to go on shows and be like, here's my resume, here's this. And it gets boring. And even for me now, just hosting something, I never want to talk about that. If I really want to know it, I'll just go watch your 15 other interviews. So this one, I figured let's just do something that no one knows, or maybe hopefully people don't know that level of you yet.
Right.
So with that getting said, are you ready to get started?
Let's jump in.
Okay. So same question I ask everybody. Number one, I like to start in the beginning. It helps us tell that story. So tell us all a little bit about Sam as a child.
Such a good question. Sam as a child was a much different Sam, that's for sure. I definitely had a quite the arc growing up. But yeah, I think as a kid, one thing that always is somewhat surprising to people is that I was an only child. And so that, I think, actually leveraged eventually sort of led me to not acting like an only child. You know, you quickly realize as an only child that you can be selfish, or you can be, you know, all about yourself and the center of attention and things like that. And given that I'm also a Leo, not to get too woo woo, that the center of attention thing kind of rears its ugly head time and time again. And so I think I was lucky enough as a kid to recognize as an only child that that didn't go over well with other kids, especially ones with brothers and sisters. And so I started to learn just sort of how to like undo some of the only child bad stuff and selfishness. And I think ultimately that kind of led to being a little bit more selfless. And then I grew up in Arizona, so that comes with its own bag of issues, I guess I'll call it. I always kind of felt like one of these things was not like the others growing up there, and wanted to get out of there and get to California was always kind of the goal. And now I'm here in San Diego, which couldn't be happier. Don't have any plan to leave. And I think, you know, growing up in Arizona, going to college in Arizona, being a frat boy in Arizona, going to law school, there's a whole lot of societal things that all of those different roles lop onto you. And so I think they all ultimately helped me sort of break out of a lot of those molds, though. And one of the first was starting as an only child.
So I don't know a lot about Arizona, I'll be honest. I can like semi tell you where that's going to be on the map, but school is just not my thing. So I do know, and this is just probably, I mean, the reason I know obviously is because and tell me if I'm wrong, because now I'm going to sound stupid because now I'm second guessing it. Was that was the state that did something where like along the borders, right, where like you'd have to have like your not ID or like birth certificate if you look Hispanic?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're talking about SB 1040. So that was actually while I was in law school, and it was essentially the like, if you're not white, we can stop you and accuse you of being an illegal immigrant bill. Yeah, so that's actually a pretty good thing to bring up to represent Arizona.
Sorry, I don't mean to like color any state in any way, because I know there's a variety of people everywhere, but that is really, I'm trying to think like anything else. Like that truly is like the one thing I remember knowing about the state. And I think it's like we had like cousins or something that lived there, and we were gonna visit. I think that's why it got brought up. We were gonna visit, and they were just like, no, we're not. Like we were just like, no, we're not going. And even I'm like, okay, well, I know I can pass, which is stupid to say, but you know, like passes, whatever. But some of my family couldn't, and so like we were just like, we're not going to go and have to like travel with birth certificates or something.
I will say, you know, look, Arizona is very beautiful, very scenic. Not everyone fits the mold, and I actually learned today. You know, I mentioned to you I was doing a city council public comment before this call, and I learned on that Arizona's actually had public clean elections, is what they call it, but it's a specific type of opening up elections for seeing where the funding comes from. And apparently Arizona's had that for 20 years and we still don't here in San Diego. So, you know, pros and cons.
There always is. That's why I say we can't say everything bad about one thing, because it's too many like sort of pieces to that puzzle, right? Like, so right. That's awesome. That's good to point out. I love it. I don't want to stop this story because I already interrupted. But tell us a little bit about, like, I love this idea that you said, I've fought against that, you know, only child, right, view or interpretation of what an only child is like. So you pushed against that. Was there something, though, that you think actually started that push, like an actual event or time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, part of it comes from our society's need to label everything. And so, you know, I think the traditional only child syndrome is like selfish, center of attention, you know, can't share, all of those types of things. And I think as a kid, if you encounter that and then someone labels it. And so I think for me, if I remember right, I maybe had a teacher or two that was like, you know, doesn't play as well with others as some of the other kids, you know, might not share as much, things like that. And then kids that have the wherewithal and have heard their parents maybe mention it probably said a thing or two to me. And I think I'm a very social being at my core. I call myself an ambivert. I very much enjoy my alone and my reflective time, but I also thrive in social settings. And so I think being social, and I've also learned as I've gotten older that I really think what drives me is helping other people, and you can't do that without being social. And so I think to me it was sort of like being able to be around others and be social kind of was running up against some of the traits that I would exhibit from being an only child. And so I realized that if I wanted to keep being social and keep interacting and for people to like me, you know, I had to be a little bit less of an only child.
How did your family react to that? Did they notice that you noticed?
I don't know. It's a good question. I know that
Yeah.
my parents always say that when I told them I was going to law school, they just were excited that I had a direction. So maybe that means that I kind of didn't before that, or maybe I just didn't inform them of it. But yeah, I think, my parents and my family definitely has taken notice of, I'd say over the past 8 years or so, how much I've changed. And I think I owe a lot of that actually to mindfulness and self-care, meditation, and things like that have really gotten me out of my own head and allowed me to reevaluate some of that stuff that I still carry with me and do.
How was high school?
High school was pretty rough. I don't know if it comes across on this interview, but I had a lisp, and so those are never easy to deal with, especially in toxic masculinity society. And so I had a lot of people, especially with the name Sam. So I had a lot of people that called me Tham because that's how it sounded when I would say it, and so that was rough. That wasn't an easy thing. I played a few sports. Football, not so great at that. Got some flack from that, and then actually ended up being pretty good at track and field. I think one of my records still stands at my high school, and so I would say like high school and middle school and high school, they started off more rough. I was blonde, bowl cut, lisp, kind of chubby kid, and got made fun of a fair amount. And then as high school progressed, I got a little bit better at one of the sports, made some better friends, but even in high school, your good friends are still jerks. They're all going to pick on each other and do whatever kids do. And so I think, if you could, this is the age old thing. If you could go back to high school, I think everyone would say, don't worry about it. They don't matter. Those opinions don't matter. And I certainly let them matter. In my first high school sweetheart, when we broke up, it was the end of the world. And, but, I think it was good because I also, dropped all those little kid pounds doing the sports, and really, I think that kind of set me on my trajectory, because ultimately realizing that at 5'9" and 150 pounds, I wasn't going pro in any sports. So I was thinking, how do I stay involved in sports? And ultimately that led me to law school because I wanted to be a sports agent.
Man, I mean, I loved asking about high school because I feel like everybody has a story. Even like really amazing popular people still have like some story, right? Of like, this happened to me. Um, First of all, I've never even ever even assumed you had a lisp at any time we talked. So that was news to me.
Good.
But yeah, I couldn't imagine. I can imagine, I guess, in a sense, just because, well, I was gay in high school, so I knew people were going to say something. But I couldn't imagine, I guess, having that experience as like a straight man, just because of like something that you couldn't control, which also is gay. But you know what I mean? Like a speech thing. Like it's such a different thing. It's I couldn't even imagine how that could affect you. But I have an idea, I guess.
And I couldn't understand it, because a lot of the time it went back to some version of it being gay or something like that. And it's like,
Mhm.
I have a gay aunt, I have a gay uncle. I didn't understand it. There was nothing wrong with being gay. So like, why is it that my lisp causes issues and then it's related to that? And that's not a thing that's wrong. So like, it was, one of these is not like the others. That's how I felt, for sure.
Yeah, that's so crazy. With that situation, and then you saying, I'm going to go to law, and I know it was sports, right? Like I'm going to go be a sports attorney. To me, it's like those two are almost like not like the other, right? Like I sports attorney, but then these people treat me like this. I don't know, like it seems so different. Like people get shocked, I know, when I tell them like I went to small high school. I was not out in high school, but I do know that I did not seem like every other guy. And to compensate, I just always was like in a relationship, or if I wasn't in a relationship, then I was just trying to like sleep with people, like girls, to be like, well, you can't accuse me of anything.
See, I'm sleeping with women.
Yeah. And still though, it still was there, right? Like, and so if the words and the things that happen to you there carry on, I personally think, with you, if you don't deal with them. A sports attorney, to me, I think like you are going into like one of the most hyper masculine, like just that world to me is like, I would never walk into that room, like it doesn't feel like a safe space for me.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, look, I'd be lying if I still said that was something I wanted to do. I stay away from the sports industry and the entertainment industry for the most part with my work. And I think I realized pretty quickly in law school sort of two things. One is that anything I went to go to a workshop or a seminar on that industry of the law and just sort of seeing the flashy three-piece suit, gold jewelry wearing agents. And I'm like, well, I don't like that. And then kind of hearing how they interact with others. And look, there's certainly a temperament in the law with lawyers where, win at all costs. And that's sort of what drives some lawyers. And look, that's a valuable thing if you are fighting court cases and you're dealing with big time contracts, but that's not for me. And so I quickly realized that vibe wasn't for me. And it certainly feeds into what you're saying. That's all part of that masculine sort of gotta win, gotta, be the strong lawyer agent image. And then also during law school was when we were seeing a lot of the professional athletes getting in trouble with their spouses. And, like Tiger Woods is one you think of, but there was a few football players too. And so I just quickly realized that like, that was not what I wanted my world to be about. And I didn't want to deal with other sports agents like that are toxic. I didn't want to get phone calls in the middle of the night from clients because they got arrested or whatever thing. And so it kind of quickly got out of my brain once I got to law school. And I think that along with just sort of growing as a human and as a man, I think I would have eventually, even if I tried to keep going into that industry, realized it was not for me.
It's interesting that you noticed right away, like, I cannot have my life be like that in the future. How is it different, and how do you feel about it? Because you're still dealing with, I think, nonprofit, a solopreneur, like that is still in its own. I mean, you're lucky you haven't heard from me at 1 or 2 in the morning, but like that you still get those people, right? Like, and I get it. It's different. I'm not doing something horrible to my wife or whatever, but maybe it's a legal issue about residency or something. There's so many things. It's still a stress. So how do you determine like this one is okay for me to take, that one was not?
For sure. Yeah. And I will say too, like I haven't always been so clear-eyed on the decisions that I make either, because in college I was going to be a marine biologist, and then I was like, oh, they didn't make any money. Then I was like, oh, I'll be an architect. Then I was like, oh, I don't want to sit at a desk my whole life. And then I became a lawyer and I sit at a desk my whole life. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the best way that I can kind of answer that question is that it's been a process. I definitely think that part of anybody's professional growth is learning how to separate some of what's going on professionally from, when you're laying awake at 1 or 2 a.m. yourself and not checking your email when you're laying there at 1 or 2 a.m. And I think for me, it's been a many year sort of progression to get to a point where even if someone does hit me up at 2 a.m. or even if someone is urgently trying to contact me, that I've done a good job sort of, first of all, on the front end with that client, help them understand that like as attorneys, we take on everyone else's problems. And so we're pretty firm about our work-life balance and our, operating hours and things like that. And if something is truly urgent and you're trying to contact us, I think there's probably very few situations where we're not going to at least write back and say, hey, that's not something they can file in court till tomorrow. I'll get in touch with you first thing in the morning. And I'd be lying if I said I had clients that respected that always too, because I've had clients where I've had to basically be very, very firm and say in not so polite ways that this is totally inappropriate. And a lot of the time, those are clients that are a lot older than me, which is a weird interaction to be essentially lecturing someone, two times my age or something like that. And so, but it is a little bit of a filter on the front end too. Like you mentioned, it's, the way people, and this is something that I tell my clients all the time. If anybody out there watching this is dealing with a contractual negotiation or a relationship that they're thinking about starting, and it's been a nightmare just to get to signing the contract, that won't change. And so that's one thing that I always try to tell clients too, is like, if I'm helping them with a client negotiation or a contract negotiation and they're being terrible about every little detail, and the person's like, well, we need the revenue and they'll be better once we sign. It's like, why would they be better once you sign? If anything, once they ink that contract, you're at their disposal and they're going to be worse. And so, yeah, I think there's a front end filter. There's a need to set expectations, which I think is tremendously important in everything that we do. And then, trying to respectfully but firmly set those parameters if they are getting pushed back on in the relationship.
And I think that's such a smart thing to bring up, because I apply that to everything in life. They are going to tell you now who they are. Yep. So do not think that something happens and then they become something else. Any person that you meet, relationship, partnership, anything, they are already letting you know today, this is how they will be. And it's not just because it's a bad day.
Right.
So like, yeah, I think it's smart that you help people understand that, because a lot of us probably would not get married or be in the relationships, right? That some people in your life are. And
I
so
mean, my relationship just ended in January of this year. We're in July now, and I still think back to it because this is very relevant. I had one of my clients actually, that's become a really good friend. I was visiting with her in New York, and she said, I hesitate to tell people this because I've broken a few marriages up. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I want you to tell me this. And essentially what she said is what you just said. She said, can you accept the person you're with who they are right now? Or are you expecting them to be someone else? Because they're never going to be. They are who they are right now. And yeah, I think we're all pretty bad at trying to hide who we are, whether we recognize that or not.
100%. One thing that I guess I'm going to assume, which I normally don't do, but I'm going to assume most people have this opinion of a lawyer, which is obviously, and you can see it on TV, right? It's going to be this negative thing, this negative person. I am one of those people, though, that does tend to be like, can I push against what everyone else thinks and see? Not all the time, because sometimes what we all think is actually just the truth. But sometimes it's not. And so I always looked at like lawyers, doctors, even accountants, like people like that had these, for me, education, like school didn't come easy. Like I wasn't a good math and science. That never was my thing. It was always like English and writing. So to me, it was like those professions never I didn't pretend to be a lawyer. I never wanted to play like accountant. Like I knew that would never be my life because I didn't have that brain. And so when I think of them, I don't actually think of them as like purely negative. I always think like they're just like so smart. And then the older I've gotten, it's been like they just have a lot of shit to take on. I mean, without like I would never want to. Like it's part of the reason. I mean, I'm not in real estate anymore. Like that in itself, like you mentioned, is me just getting yelled at by people 2 to 3 times my age. Like typically old white men yelling about something. So it's like I just was like I can't do that every day. How have you been able to step into that role, knowing that role comes with a stigma already? And then how do you fight against it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And before I even jump into that, if anybody ever knows me when I am an old white man and I'm yelling, remind me that I said on this video that I don't ever want to be that guy, because I don't.
Oh, I will.
But yeah, I mean, I think, we do a lot of things to try to erode that stigma within my firm that you've seen firsthand. And I think some of those are more subtle and some of those are a lot more overt. Like you land on our website and it's a hell of a lot different than any other lawyer website that I know about. And I've spent a lot of time over the years trying to find sister law firms that are doing it the same way and trying to be a little different. I also recognize too, I'd like to say that not every type of law can do that. Not every type of law can brand themselves differently. If you're a criminal lawyer, you have an image you have to uphold for a certain reason. And so I'm really lucky that the field that I'm in the law, that I can do that. And I think that's sort of the most forward-facing, overt way that we do things differently. And I try really hard in our copy and our social media and any of our branding to make sure that our vibe of really trying to give our clients the tools, the education, the empowerment, the support to help you make a reasoned decision, rather than wearing a 3-piece suit in a corner office talking down to you and telling you what decision to make. And some of that's the more subtle stuff too. I spend a lot of time with my clients educating, explaining, and I won't move on until I feel that the light bulb went on, because you should be making those decisions informed. And so I think that's different. And I think in doing all of that, having the brand, having the streamlined digital platforms that we use to get you in the door, and during COVID right now, in the door on the phone. And then, having our proposals have GIFs in them and videos. And I think a lot of that stuff really they're all really small things, but they all add up to really kind of erode that stuffiness and that stigma. And then we bill after we finish projects for people, so we can get stiffed really easy if somebody wants to. And, truthfully, we're not going to go after someone unless like they were just really awful to us. But a lot of our invoices are small. We do really a la carte per project stuff for people. And all of that's by design, as much as it may not look like it is, because that all allows us to be so much more relaxed, establish a much more trusting rapport, be human to our clients. We try not to build too much for communication so that we can just sit back take it in, listen. If people need to vent about the bad breakfast they had, the fight with their partner, great, we're here for it, and I'll probably do the same. And so, sometimes that also is off-putting for people that we are fully transparent, very much an open book. I definitely agree with what you said earlier. I think most lawyers wouldn't be open to do this type of interview. They wouldn't mention that they're recently had a breakup, that, X, Y, and Z, and just different things. And I think for me, and part of it probably subconsciously is to erode that stigma, is that I want you to know who I am. I want you to know what I'm going through, because at the end of the day, we're both humans and we're probably going through some similar shit, even though it might sound a little different.
100%. And I can personally say that there's honestly not one aspect of your business where I would have said, like, that is a lawyer experience that I've had before. It really isn't. Like, everything from the communication to the website design to the copy to the images to anything that I've ever had encountered with your guys's. I just said guys's. I hate that because my mom says that and we're always like, that's not. Sorry. To the whole persona that you guys have, there's nothing that I would ever say is like, this is a lawyer experience. So I also do think that you are so smart in recognizing that early, because I do believe there's a lot of stuff happening in the world, right? We're doing a lot of shifting. I personally think that consumer-wise, the consumer is deciding, I now want a conscious entrepreneur, a conscious business. And what I mean by that is I want a business that is going to tell me who they are up front, what they believe in up front, and I can then make a decision to say, do I support that and do I want to move forward with it? Yeah. It's not about just mirrors and like, right? None of that stuff. It is like, we need to know you, and you guys are ahead of the curve. I'm like, what am I doing in my head? I'm literally thinking in Spanish. So ahead of the curve in that respect and in that industry. And like, how did you see that? How did you decide to do that? Because you did that before even this company.
Yeah, well, so I can't take all the credit for that. I definitely followed my previous business partner, Emily Wilkinson, her lead a little bit. She was sort of the driving force of our original brand for Wilkinson Mazzeo PC. And then we did rebrand into Wilk Maz PC, which was all before forming Better. And she went on to do nonprofit consulting. And so Better is just myself and a minority partner. But I think, originally the first brand was really her. And then when we went through the rebranding process to become Wilk Maz, I was really in that, and I was really a part of that process. And we worked with some incredible creatives in LA that do such amazing work still to this day for so many brands. And I got to learn a lot through that process, and I got to really understand more so what all of this meant and how important it was becoming, to your point. And I wouldn't have probably had that perspective, and I wouldn't have really gotten that had it not been for that experience. And at the time, I have to kind of own up that at the time I thought we were wasting money and it was a waste of our time and that we didn't need to be doing it. And, I definitely am thankful for that experience now. And I also I was really lucky and also somewhat unfortunate last year because I had a few health things. And so when you're laid up with a health issue, you have a lot of time to think. And I don't know if it was the drugs or the time to think or both, but I definitely came up with a lot of this new brand while I was laying around last year. And a lot of it was stuff that kind of came to mind. And I thought of a bunch of different alternatives and a bunch of different slogans and offerings and names and branding. And what we ended up with just kept coming back in my head and kept coming back in my head, kind of like the old adage of meditation. The thing that keeps coming up is the thing that's on your mind. And so it just kind of stuck with me and I couldn't get away from it. And then I think to your point, really what it comes down to is I'm really lucky that my personality and my approach to the practice of law is also really aligned with this shift that we're seeing in business and in the marketplace. Because like I said, I really want to help. It's both a good and a bad thing, because in my personal relationships, I'm that fixer asshole that everyone hates that wants to just fix all the problems. But it's a great thing for my business. And so I think it's really lucky that cooperative attitude, that community focus, that desire to help other people is where people want to see their brands now. And we're certainly moving away from the product being the selling point and it actually being who they are that's selling the product or the service, because everybody can sell legal services. Everybody can sell soda. Everyone can sell these different things. So it's certainly more about now who is selling it rather than what it is. And I think, I appreciate the praise, but I think I'm also pretty lucky in the sense that my personality mixes well with the point in time that we're at.
And I mean, I guess we have to appreciate that drug, because that it really was like the original brand. That's actually, I think, when I got a hold of who you were, was that you had already rebranded.
Yeah.
And so I had seen that. And then this one, I think, is just so much better aligned, I would say. That one, was cool. Like, I looked at it, and that's why I took the contact info. But it very much is like, it was a rebel. Like, we're a rebel.
Right.
And then this one was just like, no, it's like, we're different. It doesn't mean that we're a rebel. It just means that we're different than everybody else. And I like this a lot. I do. I like the whole concept. I mean, I'm into marketing and branding. And so the whole idea of this is just like, it really appealed to me. And I feel like it is obviously going to appeal to tons of people. So, okay, that's enough. I've bragged about you too much.
Let me give a shout out to the branding agency that helped us, though.
Yeah.
They're called Forfin Creative, and they're in La Mesa here in San Diego, and all female owned and operated, and they are amazing. Jen Dirks is the founder and a good friend of mine, and they crushed it. I had a phone call with her, not related to the branding, back in November, and she was just like, I am so excited. Can I help you with this? And I was like, well, the enthusiasm alone, yes, let's go. And signed paperwork with them like the next day, and we were off to the races. And I gave them all the writing I had in my iPad about all the stuff I had thought of, and just brain dumped on them, and they killed it. They crushed it.
Wow, that's amazing. Now I'm literally just asking for personal reasons. Did they then connect you with your whole digital developer? Did they handle that, or did you have to?
So they found the back-end developer and worked with them, and they actually have been really great with that too, because they had a few issues with the developer just because we launched on March 1st and it was right around COVID, and so things started to get weird, and we needed some changes made after the launch of the website, and as it goes. And so they were really, really wonderful that when a developer wouldn't show up for a week or wasn't available, they would literally jump in and get their hands dirty and try to figure it out on their end. And so, they've gone above and beyond, and we know a few other people that have worked with them and really enjoyed it. They've got a great process for unpacking what brand you have in your head and what it should look like. And it was just, it led us to what you see now. And I think they just did such a great job, and it's a lot of credit to them.
So I want to take a quick shift from just business, because it's amazing, and I know you're going to get more people because of this. So with the business, and this is just I honestly think questions, when I was thinking, hey, Sam's going to come and join me. First of all, you're right. I was actually a little shocked that you would, because I didn't expect a lawyer to be like, I'm going to sit here and talk about this. But I want to know, how does that job, because, career, that persona, play into personal life? Because I just assume that it has to.
It does. And I think mostly in negative ways, really. I think the stigma of lawyers like to argue, which, probably is mostly true. And I think it shows up with me, but I think less so. I don't particularly like to argue. I think it more so shows up with me that I'm very convicted, and I have very strong opinions. And so I think that sometimes one of the most frustrating things in the world to me is that a lot of the time people just have this cognitive dissonance, which is very apparent right now, of course, in our country. But I can't get on board, and I'm really empathetic. I'm very intuitive, but I struggle so much to get on board with very irrational, from my viewpoint, very irrational perspectives, and sort of ignoring fact and being stubborn. And so that type of stuff will sort of cause me to very much beat that drum and really want to make a point. And I work on that personally for sure. And I also think that it feeds into other people's own stuff, right? Because most of what we all deal with in interacting with others is partially what we project on that person and create in the interaction. And so I think a lot of people see lawyer, and it's the same. They think smart or reserved or an asshole or whatever. And I think sometimes that's true. Some of that is true. I don't consider myself to be an exceptionally smart person. I think school, I was lucky, was somewhat of an easy thing for me, and so I just kept doing it. And so I think, it definitely impacts it in a lot of ways, but I also think in some positive ways, it impacts it because it allows you to have tools to work through a disagreement in different ways, and mediate things, and also communication. I think that if there is something that I am really good at that typically is attributed to a lawyer, it's I can communicate very clearly and articulately, and that is a very helpful thing in a relationship, to be able to get your thoughts and your feelings and get that stuff across clearly. That can create its own issues if your partner doesn't communicate well back. But I think, by and large, I'd say it's just kind of a wash. There's as many good things as there are bad. But yeah, I think it's really funny. I try not to tell people I'm a lawyer when I meet people socially. And then typically by the time we're talking about something I helped someone with, or they talk about something they need, and I'm like, yeah, I could help with that. They're like, wait, what? You're a lawyer? And it's funny. We've been kind of dancing around how, like, in a lot of these things we're talking about, I'm the exception to the rule, the only child. I was definitely not your average frat boy, not your average law student, not your average lawyer. And I think that's just something that's true of me. And maybe it started when I realized that I could be an only child, but be a little different.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all have this uniqueness. We all have this gift. And I do think that is yours. Like, I do think that you've decided, like, using uniqueness in a positive way is what you've chosen to sort of lead your life in. Okay. I have this personal question, and I get it if you cannot answer it, because I thought, should I ask it? Should I not? And I know I have to. Why do you think, and I want to get your personal and professional opinion, why do you think that, like, when I think of, like, these amazing things that happen in our world or our country, right? Like, it's a lawsuit that happened that changed the way now that this happens, right? Like Roe versus Wade, like so many things. Why do you think that in a lot of those cases, in a lot of those situations, the person who then comes as, like, helps this happen, we see movies about these amazing people that made things happen. And a lot of times it's like they're changing laws. So then they're teamed up with this lawyer, right? And these 2 or 4 or 5 all come and make this happen. And this might just be my perception, it always seems like that story, the legal team, is like some little tiny, oh, because we're struggling to help these people, right? And I feel like the lawyers that I have encountered that are in that industry where it's nonprofit, it's, for like social justice, all these things, it is not maintained in a financial way the same way that I can go and be a celebrity lawyer. So, and I know that that's an extreme, but why do you think that is how this is set up? That it's like to fight for people and rights and help things get better, you have to make less money than to just make this person more famous.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with that last piece of it, because it's so true. And I think you can look at the practice of law and really, honestly, a lot of different industries. But I think
Yes.
The practice of law is very much uniquely sort of situated to be very much on the forefront of these types of conversations. And I think you can look at it as either people do it to make money or people do it for the principle. And I think that what you're describing is that the people that typically take Roe v. Wade all the way to the Supreme Court, or the people that take, gay rights all the way to the Supreme Court, it's little law firms or little attorneys and maybe they're also after that notoriety, and they expect if they do win that case, they're going to be famous. And great. If that's not the primary reason, that's another fine reason, if you ask me. But I think that a lot of those times, those attorneys and those law firms that aren't the big dollar, big firms, they're doing it out of principle. And that's also why they're small and why they never became a Goliath law firm. And I think that not all the big law firms are just doing it for money either. And I think we all have our own evolution as a human being. And some of the big time law firms, I think they get to the top and then they do a ton of give back because they do evolve and they realize that it's not just about money, or they just have so much money they can't spend any more of it and they want to do it. I don't know, but I'll probably never know that. So, and I think, it's a good question. And I think there's also a lot of societal layers that pour onto that too. I think, a lot of the time attorneys won't take a case if they don't think it's a winner. And in a lot of cases, I think if you just look at the status of where that issue is in our country, nothing looks like a winner. And so why would anybody take it, right? And so it really has to be that someone's so convicted and principled and just really wants to fight that fight. And I'll even say, like, look, we certainly take our cause of helping our communities and educating people very seriously, and we sacrifice profit for it. But I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm as selfless as some of the people that we're talking about right now, because I also don't think I could do it. I don't think I could fight criminal cases. I don't think I could, fight a case on retainer or on contingency and never get paid, but win rights for a whole large population in our country. I'd love to, but I don't know if I have the grit it takes to do that either.
Do you think that there will be a time, I guess, where that form of law could be equal to the other sides of law?
I think so. I mean, I think it would require public funding, I think, is actually what it would require. I think it would need to be a nonprofit legal association that bands together a lot of lawyers that would do this otherwise. And then there would need to be like public funding through donations and grants and sponsorships and things like that. Because the way our legal system's set up, unfortunately, if you're going into court, it's just money, 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 time, which is more money. And it's set up that way for a reason. I mean, look, we're right in the middle of a big shift with Black Lives Matter. And I think it's highlighting a lot of the systems and how they're set up really stacked against people. And I think if people have always understood the legal system to be stacked against them, then, and they're now arguing that it's not a white supremacist and racist system, the legal system, that's a really small step to take. And they should really look at that step, because it is. And it was set up in a way to help people be profiteers on it, but in addition to hold a lot of populations down. And those two things go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And so, our legal system, $350 to file a lawsuit is not any accident. It's not arbitrary. It's meant to keep people out of the legal system that can't afford it. And that, obviously is populations of color. So I think, it's always been built in a way to allow people to rise to the top and profit off of it, just like a lot of our systems. And I think the devastating impact of that is that the legal system affects people's life and liberty.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so happy that you answered that. And I know I'm so happy you answered that, because I know people think that, right? Like, I know they have questions, and I know I can promise you the lawyers I've had would never have answered that question. So thank you for doing that. I did want to, I guess, ask also, is there anything, and I know that this isn't like your primary focus, but just you with your legal background, with everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter, what would you say advice for someone who feels that they're in that situation, right? Like, I got pulled over, this happened. What legally should I know or should I be aware of? Is there and I know that there's not a one plan fits all scenario, but at least, like, who should I reach out to first? Like, how can we help people be empowered?
Yeah, I think the number one first step is making sure that you get into contact with a good bail attorney, someone that can handle your bail, hearing your bail situation, because the bail system in this country specifically is something that has been designed and perpetrated for many, many decades to keep people down and specifically keep people in jail. There are a lot of people in jail right now that have never even had their day in court, which we as the public and you hear in the media, like, everyone gets their day in court and you get your freedom until you get your day in court. You're presumed innocent. That's BS, unfortunately, for the vast majority of the people wrapped up in our legal system. And so a good attorney that can help you with bail, that's number one, so that you can get out of jail. Number two is making sure that you can find an attorney that's going to be able to help you with whatever the issues are. And frankly, like, if I could give one piece of advice, it's make sure that you have an attorney, period, because most of these systems are designed to be so woefully complicated, complex, confusing, that they are sort of purposely intended to make people make mistakes if they try to do it themselves. And I get it too. Trust me, like, this is something I probably shouldn't mention on a video that's going to be public, but I've been arrested 5 times. And so that was mostly in college. But I know personally that the expense to hire a lawyer when you're already looking down the barrel of a legal thing and maybe fines and all this stuff, it's a very, very scary and very sort of prohibitive thing. And I get that, but I would also say that, like, if you go into debt for paying for your lawyer, rather than going to jail or paying those fines for forever and not being able to vote in many of our states, that once you have that stuff and you don't pay it off, you can't vote, the lawyer is worth it. And so first and foremost, try to find a legal aid society, try to find a pro bono outfit that'll do it for you, especially nowadays. Hopefully there's a lot more lawyers stepping up to do that. And so find someone, make sure you get someone, try to, do whatever you can to pay for them. Make sure that it's a reasonable rate, but do whatever you can to pay for them, because even if that's expensive, you're going to be a lot better off paying that lawyer off than ending up in our legal system and then wrapped up in that forever. And I realize while I'm saying this kind of sounds like an advertisement for lawyers, and I'm not by any means trying to be like, make sure you get a lawyer, better call Saul.
Yeah.
Like, you need to make sure that you handle those things properly because they're stacked against you.
And I can 110% agree to that. Like, I know with my family, there's been things where we needed lawyers, and it's like, avoid. Like, no, you just have to do it. Like, luckily there are other people in my family that will say, like, we have to, like, you just have to go get it. Because the alternative is then, yes, jail. And you don't know what will happen in there. Like, a brother has been to jail for a while. Like, I know, like, you're just going to get stuck in something, and it takes forever for things to happen, if they do happen. So, I personally think I don't even care. This can be a commercial for lawyers. Like, you need to go get a lawyer if something like this happens. And I think right now in particular, I know at least on my feed, on every social media channel I'm on, it is someone stepping up saying, I'm going to give free counsel. Please contact me if this happens. Or, hey, contact me. I'll help with advice, whatever it is. And I think what people need to be doing is writing those down, taking that information, so that if you are in this situation, then at least you do have some form of list of resources that you can then rely on.
Absolutely. So, yeah. I mean, we did a seminar we did a call with California Innocence Project, that's part of my law school, and learned about bail hearings, even though that's not anything that we normally do, as all the protests started, so that some of our clients could write our phone number on their arms. So while they're out, if something happens, they can call us, and it was, we can help in that regard. And, I think it's crazy, because I've always told people, like, the legal system is like the health system. Once you're wrapped up in it, and then you're a number, and then there's really very little you can do to really change your circumstances. And so, I was always used to say that, but I've been a part of the legal system. And frankly, if I weren't white, I might still be in jail or might not be alive to this day. And that is, me recognizing my privilege too, because as a white guy, I never feared for my safety, let alone my life, and getting arrested several times. And so it's just a different thing. And I think for people of color, you really have to make sure that the lawyer is the thing you prioritize, because the lawyer can speak the language and knows the ropes to pull.
Yeah. Sam, I'm so happy that you joined today and that you shared all the stuff you shared. I hope nothing legally happens to impact you. But everything was awesome. Like, honestly, I just think, like, this kind of honest conversation with a legal person of any kind is rare. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that you wanted to have a lawyer on your show, given that, we're not the most entertaining folks sometimes. And like I said, after I saw the first one of yours, I love this. I love the questions, and it's my pleasure to be here.
So before we head out, I have one last question, but before we even get into that, please let everyone know how they can get in touch with you or follow you, social media, how we can all be part of SAM.
Sure. Yeah. Good plug. Thank you. So with the social media, all of our accounts are at In Better We Trust, and then www.inbetterwetrust.com. And then if you want to shoot us an email, we have a fictional hedgehog mascot, Birdie the Better Hedgehog. And so you'd be emailing Birdie at inbetterwetrust.com. But there's also like a little video of my face on our website. If you click my face, you can contact us that way too. And the last thing is we have a YouTube with like 80 videos on it, 5 to 10 minute videos explaining a lot of frequently asked questions. And that's just the Better APC YouTube.
That is actually a really good YouTube. I was actually planning to mention this because they do have a lot of really good videos of like, you don't know any of this stuff. Like, I didn't know any of this stuff. And they do a really good job at explaining it. So, okay, last question. We started in the beginning. I like to end in the same way. I know you actually sort of preemptively answered this, like right in the beginning of our thing, and I almost had to cut you off. So if that little boy or young child that was Sam were in front of you today, what do you think that you'd be able to, or that you'd want to, tell him or give him as far as advice?
Man, a lot of things probably. Cut the bowl cut. That I'd probably start there. Yeah, I think it's the pretty cliche advice. Stop worrying about what people think so much. Really, really pay attention to yourself and trust in what you learn about yourself in doing so. I think there's so many things that I didn't even realize about myself to my 30s. That, you know, if I would have just stepped back out of my head and paid some attention, I would have realized a lot sooner, and it would have been a lot better for it. So yeah, I think, you know, step back from what everybody else thinks, pay attention to yourself, try to learn about yourself, spend some time learning those things and working on yourself, and always just be good to others. Share, you selfish little only child, share.
Sam, this was awesome. Thank you so much. Seriously.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. This was fun.
Awesome. Well, you guys, we will see you all next week. So see you then. Bye.